Welcome to the Dallas ISD Virtual Challenge Forum, Go Vote, an exercise in democracy. Hello, I'm Carla Hudspeth, Executive Director of Extracurricular and Extended Learning Opportunities. Thank you for participating in the Social Impact Challenge program. The initiative tasks high school students like yourself to design and implement solutions to address some of our community's toughest issues. This year, you will select a challenge of choice to address issues surrounding voting. We hope the presentations throughout this forum will provide you with information that will help you in your journey to make a difference in your school, your neighborhood, and your city. But first, if you have any questions throughout the forum, please type those into the question and answer box. We will try to get to as many as time permits. Let's start this journey by asking the question, why is voting important? And for the answer to that most basic question, we reached out to the managing director of the Inner City Community Development Corporation and a former member of the Dallas City Council, Diane Ragsdale.
Thank you so very kindly. Thank you very kindly. I'm so glad to be here, Charlotte, and certainly to all of you who organize such. You know, oftentimes people raise the issue, why is it important to vote? Matter of fact, we have a number of people. Most of the people don't vote. To be quite frank with you, we might have a significant number of people who are registered, but most of whom simply don't vote. And I maintain that one of the reasons that people don't vote is that they don't see the connection of voting to their day-to-day lives. It's kind of like my pastor when he's preaching the word of God, he says, let me make it live for you. And so the question is raised is that we have to make voting live for people. People have to realize that in general, politics is about decision making and about those who make decisions and about those who determine really the direction of people's lives. Politics and voting affect our day-to-day lives. And so we got to recognize that. Matter of fact, so let me borrow my pastor's statement. Let me make it live for you. When you drink water, you need to think about voting in politics because the water is controlled, for example, by the municipality, by, in this case, the city of Dallas. Matter of fact, the city of Dallas really sells water to many surrounding suburbs. And so it's as fundamental as basic as that. When you look at not just drinking water, but taking a bath. And I need to say this, when you're flushing the commode, that's about water. And so that's very fundamental. And politicians control that. And voting determines who will be elected. And so voting is connected to your day-to-day life. And so as one of those indications, or one of those ways is the control of water. And then there are times when people might say, my lights are turned off, okay? I cannot afford my utility bills. The reality is when you look at electricity, it's about to get, it's already kind of warm or whatever, but my point here is that that's controlled by the Public Utility Commission. And the governor appoints the PUC, appoints the Public Utility Commission. I'm talking about the entity that controls basic things like electricity. And the same thing as the Railroad Commission controlling the gas. And so we go to elected officials to control our day-to-day lives. And how do you become elected? People have to vote for you. So voting is about your day-to-day life. It is about recognizing that when I cast a vote, I am indeed affecting my day-to-day life. Now, and let me talk to the young people, and in particular when we talk about police abuse. That's been a major issue in this country. We can't run away from it. Police misconduct, we can't run away from it. It's been a major issue. And so that police departments are controlled by the cities. And those city council members are elected. And you have to vote to elect someone. And so the key, though, is that when you talk about police misconduct or police abuse, you need to think about politics and voting. And so when you think about affordable housing, if my family is going to become about to get evicted, that's done by the JP, by a judge. That judge is elected. And when we talk about the distribution of resources, the park department, for example, young men and women like to play basketball. And oftentimes what you find is that a park is controlled by, once again, voting and elected officials. And so we got to make voting live for people. We got to make sure that people understand the importance of voting, and so that they will vote. It's not just something that's out there, that's distant from you. It is something that affects your day-to-day life. It's said that you can't get away. You got to pay taxes. You're not going to escape that. And the reality is that elected officials and voting, those things, voting determines what what the taxes that you will have to pay. But I want to talk about in general, the criminal justice system. I know we talked about it, but the police is not just the only thing related to the criminal justice system. You appear before, let's just say, a state district judge. In this case, I say it's criminal. And what you find that those criminal judges are elected. And so the key is sometimes we as African Americans, we as Latinos, people of color, poor people, we don't receive justice at all at the hands of the criminal justice system. And significant part, it not only starts at the council level, but it also starts at the state level with respect to criminal judges that indeed many times penalize people or sentence people, or there's a system of selecting jurors. I mean, you've heard, if you're not registered to vote, and oftentimes vote, many times you're not selected as a juror. So we want to encourage that. I live in South Dallas proper, born and raised in South Dallas proper, and live in South Dallas proper. Glad to say that I graduated from the great James Madison High School. And so and what we find there is that even the school district, ultimately is controlled by elected officials. The curriculum, the TEA, et cetera, all these things at that level are controlled by elected officials. And so the school board, you have the school board that makes policies, et cetera. Those people are elected. So ultimately, the education system is controlled ultimately by elected officials. And so it's important that we recognize this. So when you pick up the phone and you say, you're calling 911 and I need a firefighter and I need a police officer, the reality is that the fire department is controlled by elected officials. The police department, as indicated, is controlled by elected officials. And that means that and those people are voted in. You have to vote to become elected. And so the key here is that voting controls or affects our day-to-day lives. And so I'm just trying to make it live to you, young people. Before I was elected on the council, I was a member of the City Planning Commission, and what that does is I was appointed by an elected official, the Honorable Elsie Faye Higgins. And what that does is determine how land will be used, to determine the zoning, and to make sure that hey, in some places in South Dallas or Southern Dallas, you have lead smelters close to residential areas, or you might have industrial, commercial businesses within residential communities are close to. That's all about zoning, and zoning is controlled by elected officials. And of course, you cannot become elected unless you are voted. And let me move forward to to what's going on right now. We cannot ignore healthcare. Good God Almighty, healthcare. Here we have now, for the most part, as a result of this pandemic, you have for the most part, people of color, African Americans and Latinos who are dying, and so what it is stated time and time again that we are very vulnerable because we don't have good health care on the front end before the pandemic, that we're vulnerable because of the conditions that we have, the diabetes and the cancer, the heart disease, etc. And so that we're very vulnerable, and so therefore we find ourselves becoming infected and also dying. But once again, when you look at healthcare and you look at our communities, you will find that many of our businesses are fast food restaurants, and Lord knows that affects your health in an adverse way, in a negative way. You got to have some fresh produce. You got to, like Mama and Daddy used to say, you got to have you some vegetables, and Dad, eat those green vegetables. And so the keto, but oftentimes we don't have that accessible in our communities. The type of fresh produce that we need. That's why they call it a food insecure area, or some people call it a food desert area, which is what we don't use anymore. But my point, though, it is zoning that allows these type of fast food restaurants to continue to be developed in our area. We have an oversaturation of those businesses, and which indeed affect our health. And the bottom line here, zoning that allows those businesses is controlled by voting, as well as our overall health. Now, yes, I am so sorry.
We have several questions, and Christina, will you ask some of those questions?
Ms. Ragsdale, one of the questions that came in is, why did you run for public office?
Well, first of all, I wanted to impact public policy to the extent that I could. I know at the end of the day, we have to change things in a foundational way. We have to in a systemic way. And that way is changing policy. And so elected officials change policy. Elected officials create policy. Elected officials can influence policy. But not just influence, they actually change policy and create policy. And I wanted to be a part of that. And because prior to running, I was on the City Plan Commission, but also I was what was called a one-year craft child, meaning I was under her leadership for so many years as a one-year craft child.
And how long did you serve in office?
From 84 to 91, from 1984 to 91. And I learned a number of things, and one of which one of those things that I learned is how to try to connect voting with people's day-to-day lives, and so because people just did not necessarily see the impact and how voting affected them, and it's so important that we see that and recognizing all of the different issues and concerns, the lack of affordable housing, the lack of quality housing, the racism that continues to exist in different institutions. This is where elected officials can make a difference, and I wanted to be a part of that. Now, I want to share with people that you don't have to necessarily be elected to step forward and make a difference, and so and you don't have to be elected to create policy and to work to implement good policy. You don't have to be elected to do that. I'm not elected now, but I'm still out here involved. And so that's extremely important that we continue to do that. And I think it was Tip O'Neill that said, all politics start local. I think that's what he said, am I right? And so
Yes,
the key though is that so that's one of the reasons I want to run. And then beyond that, I want to make sure that I emphasize, I think our minimum wage that the federal government established, I think it's $7.75. And so we know people can't live on that. We know people can't live on that. And right today, the minimum wage was passed by the Congress. It's still $7.75. And so we got to make sure and that was that's being what you make and what a given employer can pay you. That is controlled by voting. And so we got to make sure that we, in order for us to have our quality of life, in order for our living conditions to improve, then we must have a minimum wage that is livable. That's why there has been a strong fight. I'm sorry, it sounds like you want to ask me another question. That's why it's been a strong fight toward a living wage. That's where $15 an hour came from. You understand? And that what our youth need to understand is that is controlled by voting, the minimum wage.
That's awesome. You were mentioning zoning laws earlier,
yes.
And we have a question about zoning laws. How are zoning laws changed? Last time I checked, in order to combine a plat or change commercial land to residential or vice versa, this process took about 24 months.
Yeah, well, that was ridiculous. And so once again, elected officials, they are controlled by your vote. And so that is, they should have never taken that long. That's the city council should change policies to make sure that does not take place. And so not only as it relates to the procedures with respect to zoning, but also what's important is the policy. When we look at the proliferation of alcohol-related businesses in Southern Dallas, or in particular in South Dallas proper, where you got South Dallas proper, sunny South Dallas, for instance, where you might have about $44 million of alcohol-related sales that's generated, but $4 million coming from South Dallas proper. Okay, and so my point, we're talking about a saturation of alcohol-related businesses, and we're talking about that which is really oppressive and racist and elitist in nature. So we have to move forward to change these things. We just can't use these terms. We got to move protest to policy, and so that we might move forward to improve the living conditions or to create a society that's decent for all of us.
I have one final question for you, Ms.
Oh,
Ragsdale.
yeah.
What information do local policymakers use to develop policy?
Well, that is an excellent question. First of all, you need, in part, it is data, it is research, in part. But the other part, though, you need to listen to your constituents. I mean, it is representative government. That's why you were elected by the people. The vote elected you. And so you need to listen to your constituents, meaning to those who you are representing. But in addition to that, you need to listen to the research. And so, but because research indeed can lead to good policy. I know somebody that's in office right today, I think at the head of the table. He needs to listen to research. And so, but the keto, that's not taking place. So data drives good decision making. Research can drive good decision making, but also the pain of the people and the views of the people can drive good decision making.
Thank you, Ms. Ragsdale. We really appreciate your years of service to the city of Dallas.
Thank you so very kindly.
Our next presenter will give us a quick history about voting rights in America. Sandra Malone is a former Dallas ISD administrator and has worked with organizations like the Lynx and Delta Sigma Theta on voting awareness campaigns throughout the city. Ms. Malone?
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Ms. Hudspeth and Mr. Patterson, for allowing me to participate in this. And I want to give a shout out to the students who are participating in this forum and this impact program. I want to mention one of the things that Ms. Ragsdale emphasized is that actions of elected officials control our everyday lives. And those officials are elected by people who vote. So we want to talk about how we got the voting rights in America. Leaders are chosen all over the country, all over the world by different kinds of ways at all levels. What we represent in this country is democracy. Our governing is by the democratic method. More specifically, we have what we call a representative democracy. A representative democracy is a governmental structure that is based on citizens electing representatives to serve on their behalf. Now, what countries have this kind of a government? Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom are the ones that practice democracies, the representative democracy, either partially or entirely. So how do we get this kind of operation in the United States? We have a United States Constitution that guarantees its citizens the right to vote. And the first 10 amendments of the US Constitution are referred to as the Bill of Rights. We'll list all of those amendments, and they are considered crucial by the early founders, and they were necessary to gain support of the states. Later, there were other amendments used to expand as well as correct some of the things that were not in those original 10 amendments. Where are our representatives located? They're at the city level, the county level. They're in independent entities like the Board of Education, school boards, county boards. They're also at the state and national level. So who can vote? Who cannot vote? Why vote? What happens when you vote? What happens when you don't vote are very important questions for you to consider. It has not always been that everyone in the United States, in America, had the opportunity to vote, to exercise that right. This is a timeline of voting in the United States. Not everyone, as I said, not everyone had the opportunity to vote when our Constitution was established. So let's look at the timeline. Starting in 1776, the only people in the United States who had the right to vote were white, property-owning, Protestant males. That continued until 1850, when white men, regardless of their property ownership or religion, could then have the right to vote. Those were the only two entities in the United States that could vote. In 1869 through 1870, there were laws passed that said all male citizens, regardless of race, color, or previous condition of servitude, those that were in slavery or those that were servants, could vote. So starting in 1970, still only males in the United States were eligible to vote. Not until then in 1889, after the end of the Civil War, there was a restriction placed because there was a literacy tax and a poll tax. And if you'll excuse me, poll is incorrectly spelled there. There's a poll tax that was designed to limit the voting of some people in the United States. So still only males had the right to vote. In 1920, the 19th Amendment, that's we going past. We said the first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights did not include everything, so it did not include women. So the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote in the United States. So at that point, everyone in the United States, supposedly, according to gender, regardless of gender and regardless of race, could vote. However, there's really, the next one shows a really a large omission. Native Americans, American Indians, were granted citizenship and the right to vote not until 1924. Although these are indigenous people, they were not considered citizens of the United States if they lived on a reservation, and so they didn't get the right to vote as a citizen of this country until 1924. 1964, there was the Civil Rights Act, and the Civil Rights Act looked at the discrimination and on the basis of race, national origin, gender, or religion, and started making sure that things were happening and some things were illegal and needed to change. So that was 64. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act was instituted to make sure that the rights of minority voters were respected and that all those barriers to their being able to vote were eliminated at that point. There were still some barriers to voting, however, because to vote you had to pay a poll tax in some states. So in 1966, there was a law passed to eliminate the poll tax. You could vote in the United States up to that point when you were 21 years of age or older. And in 1971, the voting age was changed, and you're able to vote when you are 18 years of age. You were eligible and had the right to vote. And these are the only voting laws that we see that's expanded the right to vote to include all members who were citizens of the United States. However, I need to note that there were certain periods of time, and I start with 2013 to 2015, but we could continue that to include up to 2020, because there are certain things of various measures instituted by the state or either by at the national level, where there are certain things given to limit the voting rights of other people, and ethnic minorities are most dramatically affected. And some examples of that are eliminating the Department of Justice oversight, because in 1975, there was an extension of the Voting Rights Act that had a large effect on Hispanic and Latino population. They were really sort of overlooked until that time, but in 1975, there was an emphasis to make sure that they were included and given that the rights to vote. But there are other things that in our history that have gone beside the poll tax that have been given to and instituted in order to vote, to suppress the right to vote in the United States.
Ms. Malone, we have a question for you. Why was the voting age set at 18 and not 16?
Well, one of the reasons was you could join the military and fight for our country at the age of 18, but you couldn't vote. So if you are eligible to go and defend the country, you should be able to have a voice in the policies of the country.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Malone, for that quick history lesson. Now let's take a closer look at some local voting statistics and issues facing elected officials in the upcoming Texas legislative session with the president of the League of Women Voters of Dallas, Diane Tossian. Ms. Tossian?
Thank you, Charlotte. How are you? Okay, guys. First of all, I want to say thank you for asking the League of Women Voters of Dallas to come and participate in your challenge. And I want to let you know right off the bat that I've created a handout that's going to cover pretty much everything I say, except any answers to questions you ask, that will be provided to you by your teachers once this program is completed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly review some problems and their solutions that came out of some statistics. And after that, I will give you my version of a challenge, talk a little bit about what's next, and sum up by saying we would love to help you solve your problems, and we are there to answer your questions. So I want to start out by saying that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We do not endorse any political parties or candidates, but we are very much there for you to know how individual candidates, what their positions are on issues. So we have a voter guide, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the League also has chapters at various levels. So the League of Women Voters of Dallas is a local chapter. And so we interact with our local elected officials. That would be the county commissioners, who are directly impacting how we vote, the city council and mayor, the DISD school board, and cities, any other cities that are in or overlap Dallas County. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about some problems and how they got solved. One of the problems that we noticed in 2014 was that people were going to the wrong polling location to vote. Now, this was a big deal because in 2014, this had not been was not a new problem. You know, you don't study something that needs a solution unless there's a problem, right? So in 2014, an SMU exit poll discovered that 9% of the voters went to wrong polling locations, and that about half of those never made it to the correct location. The solution to this problem was achieved in Dallas for early voting before 2019, but for election day in the fall of 2019 with the adoption of vote centers. Now, the nice thing about a vote center is that in Dallas County, you can vote at any location that is a polling location throughout the county, both for early voting and for election day, which means that you don't have to travel all the way back to your home from work in order to vote anymore. That's what it was like before. Or if you're working in a county adjacent to Dallas, you only need to drive in as far as the nearest voting location on the edge of the county to cast a ballot. So it makes it much easier for you to find the time to make your trip to the polling location. Another problem, which Ms. Ragsdale mentioned briefly, was low voter engagement. In 2016, LWV Dallas partnered with LULAC and Faith in Texas to register voters in DISD high schools and teach students how and why to vote. Over 2,000 students were registered. We also worked with Dallas County Elections Department, who tracked over 1,000 of these registrations in their voter file. After the 2016 presidential election, we found that young people who'd been exposed to our messages of how and why to vote were 23% more likely to vote than similar young people who had not heard the messages. Another one of our panelists here is Richard Marcus, and he's with March to the Polls, and they do a good job of educating the high school students. League of Women Voters tends to focus on the Dallas College campus student body. Solutions to this problem were, there are several. I'll mention two. One is when we help people share information with people about engagement, it looks like I've messed up my notes here. Okay. I want to go back to Ms. Ragsdale's comment and follow up on it, because I think it was in 2018 that 9.8% of eligible voters voted. 9.8%. That means that less than 10% of the people who voted elected the officials that make the rules that we live by. 90% of those people did not vote. It's like letting somebody else drive your car off, a stranger, giving your car to a stranger. It just makes no sense. Anyway, another thing that we are doing to increase voter engagement is voter engagement is to increase voter registration through in-person registration, which is what we typically do. We also have, and that can't happen now because of COVID. So we're sending people to registertovote.org. And then we have a digital source for voter engagement called Be a Texas Voter. And I would like to share a video clip with you from Be a Texas Voter.
I know what you're thinking. Politics, government, it's all out there. What does it matter? It's all rigged. Nothing ever changes. Come with me.
So, as I was growing up, education was something very important to me. My dad, when I was a child, would always come home covered in soot from head to toe, just sweating profusely. He was an immigrant worker that worked at a metal foundry, and when he would arrive, he would come and he would give all of us children a huge hug and tell us that that's not the life that he wanted for us. He would say that education was the way that we could like better prepare ourselves, that we could create opportunity for ourselves. Later, when I was going to high school, I actually ended up going to the School for the Talented and Gifted, which is one of the top schools in the nation. But once I reached junior year, all my peers were applying to college, and I just wasn't, because I knew that my family just didn't have the money to get me there.
It sounds like there was a real pivotal moment when you were a junior in high school, realizing everybody's applying.
Mm-hmm.
And where were you in that?
At some point, my English professor kind of like came by and he was like, "Hey, so what are you doing?" And that's when I broke down. And I ended up confessing to him that I just wasn't gonna go to college. There was no way that the daughter of people that only went to elementary school could attend college. So he ended up encouraging me to just go ahead and submit the applications. So I ended up doing that, and that's when I received a letter in the mail about a month later congratulating me, saying like, "Hey, welcome to SMU."
So how did you feel when you received that letter of acceptance from SMU?
It was a shock. It was like the biggest shock of my life. My parents were excited. And after that initial excitement came, there came a lot of sadness. Just knowing that it was something that just couldn't be fulfilled.
Right, because of the money.
Because my parents couldn't afford it, and I couldn't afford to attend SMU.
So then a couple of months later, after you got the acceptance letter and you'd given up, another letter comes.
Yes.
And what did it say?
Yeah, so I received the second letter in the mail from the financial aid office saying, "Hey, we really do want you to come to SMU. Here's some more money for you to come." That opened the world to me. Mm-hmm. That meant that I could study, that I could learn languages, that I could be with people that loved education just as much as I loved education.
Yeah. How did the financial aid that you received from SMU influence how you think about voting right now, today?
Yeah, so when I received that financial aid package, I started looking at the breakdown of what I had received. Some of that money came from the Student Senate, but a good portion of it came from the Financial Aid Office. And that money was federal money, funds that were allocated by the people that we voted and put into government to go towards people's education. So to me, at that moment, that's when voting became a reality. That's when voting became something that affected me in my daily life.
So how did you feel about voting and politics when you were in high school?
To me, voting when I was in high school was something very unimportant. It was something that old people with a lot of time did. I had no clue as to the process. I had no idea how to register to vote or how to even find my polling location, how to figure out if I was registered or not. So to me, voting was something very far away, something very distant, something that just didn't have anything to do with me.
So are you passionate now about telling people how to vote and how to register and things like that?
Yes, it's actually one of the things that's very close to my heart. I like helping people find their voice, and to me, it's very important to let people know that voting is not this really long and arduous process, but that it's very simple to just get registered, and it's very simple to find your locations to go vote. And
Yeah.
it doesn't really take that much time.
What does your future look like today?
Yes. So now I have more possibilities. By going through college, I was able to attain skills that I otherwise would not have been able to attain. I can speak 7 languages.
What?
Yes. And I am looking forward to using those skills that I attained and helping others. So to me, that's what education means. To me, that's what this opportunity given to me by the federal government means. It means helping others too.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for sharing your story.
250 years ago, 56 people signed the Declaration of Independence in protest. A country was born.
After 130 years of protest, American women in 1919 still couldn't vote. In 1920, they could. And we did. After centuries of enslavement, a civil war, and another 100 years, minorities in 1964 were beaten, bullied, and prevented from voting. In 1965, that changed. And now minorities are a majority in many Texas cities. What about you? What are you doing? What can you do?
Problems in our society are all around us. You simply need to listen, look around, and use what you see and hear. Your challenge will show up and may surprise you. But if you think about these things, do a little bit of research, whatever it is that grabs your passion will pop up at you, and you will have a project, and you have a team. I understand there are 7 or 8 people in each one of the teams to help you come up with a solution. The League of Women Voters would love to help you. And we have given you our information on how to reach out to us. I've provided links to all of the Be a Texas Voter series. Just wonder if you have any questions. It looks like there's one in Q&A at the moment. I haven't looked at it.
The question is, how has partisanship affected the modern day implementation of voting rights?
That's a huge question. There's a very simple answer. We live in highly partisan times. People on the left and the right side of the political spectrum won't even talk to each other, don't even think that they're decent human beings on the other side. And so the solution is an effort to find a common ground and to become civil again. There is not much civility out there. In fact, there is people toting guns and being threatening in the most, well, they're killing people. So just for what they believe. Now, I guess this is not really new. But we are seeing it powerfully these days. And so I'm delighted to be with the League of Women Voters because we are trying to be the middle, not, I won't say we're the middle ground because that's not really exactly right, but we are trying to be not on the Democratic or the Republican or the Libertarian or the Green side of it. We have a grassroots organization. We think of these issues on a grassroots level, and it works its way up through the various chapter levels. That probably didn't answer the question they wanted.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Tossian.
You're welcome.
Now you may be asking yourself, what can high school students do? How can we make a difference? We have some suggestions, but first, listen to this message from Alicia Keys and America Ferreira. A fighter, do you know how to use your power? Our next presenter will tell you how to get engaged on your campus through the Student Voter Empowerment Coalition. Richard Marcus is with March to the Polls. Mr. Marcus?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me, Ms. Hudspeth and Mr. Patterson. Greatly appreciate it. March to the Polls is an organization that was formed, and it's a nonpartisan organization formed in 2015. It's a nonpartisan voter empowerment coalition, and it's dedicated to markedly increasing voter participation, particularly among historically underrepresented, low propensity voters. Further, March to the Polls strives to ensure that candidates and elected officials, national, state, and local, advocate and promote justice, equity, and equal opportunity for all. March to the Polls started, I think Ms. Tossian had mentioned, we started in the high schools registering students. We were starting in the lunchroom. But it's hard to keep kids' attention in auditoriums and lunchrooms. So we talked to the schools and said, how about if we got to the classrooms? And they said, that's a good idea. So we started going to the classrooms, and we went to each classroom in every DISD high school. We have over 2,000 volunteers that go to register students in the classrooms today at DISD and Richardson and Garland and now in Tarrant County high schools. We learned a lot in the classrooms. We learned that unfortunately a lot of kids don't think their vote counts. They don't think politicians listen to them. In many cases, they're right. Politicians may not listen to them. And we ask them why. Well, they think maybe it's electoral college or other reasons. I said, you ever think that maybe they don't listen to you because you don't vote? That maybe if you went out and voted, they might start listening to you? We were in high school at Skyline. Skyline's probably bigger than most of the high schools here. But we were talking to the senior class, and there's, I think, 700 or 800 students in the senior class at Skyline. On a school board election, their senior class, if they decided that they wanted to nominate one of their own to run for school board, because in that district, only 2 to 3% of the people voted, they could have elected their own school board member. And their number one complaint, I don't know about you kids, that I heard from them all the time is they can't stand their lunches. So I said, well, if you want to get your lunches changed, go talk to your school board member. Maybe she can or he can do something about it. Anyway, this thing led, and one day we were at Irma Rangel, which is a young women's leadership school, and one of the kids said to me, you know, I'd like to get involved. How can we get involved? And I said, well, you have your school courses. She said, but no, they don't deal with civics. They don't deal with everyday things. I said, well, you know, let me think how we could do this. And one of the girls, I'll tell you their name, was Gabby Hernandez. The other was Maria Lopez. Maria was undocumented. Gabby's family was from Central America. And they said, we want to get involved. So we thought about it. And together, between them and March to the Polls, we decided we start the Student Voter Empowerment Coalition. So you may say, well, what is the Student Voter Empower Coalition? These are chapters that are being formed in every high school in DISD. They formed the first one at Irma Rangel. We've got them in other high schools. And these chapters are run by the students themselves. They're open from 9th to 12th grade. March to the Polls will financially support them in the things that they do. And their mission is to work to increase voter awareness and participation among students and their families through voter education, motivation, empowerment, and civic engagement to promote equity for all. That's their mission. But being that they're student-led and student-run, each of the chapters may do different things. For instance, one of them suggested we have an art contest. And we had an art contest among all the high schools. And two students from, one from Hillcrest, one from Jefferson, and two students from Skyline 1. The theme had to do with voting, but they could do anything that related to voting, their issues, or whatever they were. They got anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 each because they won. Another one of the chapters said, you know, I'd like to have a forum, and this was in 2018. We would like to have a forum where a candidate forum when they were running for mayor. Every mayoral candidate came to that forum. It was held at the Texas Theater in Oak Cliff. The students asked the questions, got the answers they wanted, and all of a sudden they were becoming involved and they were learning, and they weren't all of voting age. Some were juniors, some were sophomores, some were freshmen, but they were learning what it was about, what affected their lives, the issues they have, whether it be in the lunches they eat or getting a good job, or their number one issue, if you were a senior, was just going to college and the affordability of college. These were the issues these students had. Well, they have a voice, they have power, and they exercise that power at the ballot box. So March to the Polls is supporting the chapters for SVAC at every high school. If you are interested in forming a chapter, send me an email to info@marchtothepolls.org. Info, I-N-F-O, @marchtothepolls.org. We will support you. We will help you form it. We will, even if you need an advisor, a staff member, or a school member to work with you on that, we will see that you have one, and we will support your efforts. And let me give you an idea of some of the things the students are going to be doing. We're going to be bringing their local representatives and officials from the city council, the commissioner's court, the school board, law enforcement agencies to communicate with the students at their school and their student body about the issues important to them, whatever they might be, so they can hear from the students the issues that they confront or their families confront. We will also take them by bus down to I forgot the name you call them, but to city council, to the meetings that they have, so they can participate in these meetings and see what it's like, and they could again petition their representatives on the issues important to them. We will take a few of them to Washington, D.C. We're going to take them to Austin so they can see how the process works. You don't have to be 18. You could be 15 and 16 to be part of it. These are field trips that we will have through the schools. You can petition your commissioners, all your people. You will have your own workshops that you want to have. We'll have music contests. You can get other members of your school, your bands or your orchestras or whatever to participate. We'll have debates among all the schools related to civics and things important to them. These are all led by the students, and they determine the activities they want to do. We will just financially support them. We want the students to know that they have a voice. Their voice matters, and they exercise that voice at the poll. And for those of you not old enough to vote, we hope by the time you learn about all the things that affect your life, and I think it's been referred to before, 90% of them are local issues, whether it be the potholes in front of your street or whatever they might be, that you will want to go to the polls. One of the most exciting days of my life was when we rented buses and went to Spruce High School, and we got 50 kids to go vote in 2018, and to see the faces on those kids when they came out of the polling booth after they cast their first ballot just said to me, everything that we're doing is worthwhile. And we hope that we can help you in the same manner. We can hope that you can become civically engaged. We will support you. March to the Polls will support you. By the way, if you are 18, it's too late to register for this election. But on our website, you could, if you don't have a printer at home, you could go to our website, marchtothemttp.org, and you can fill out the application to register. We will mail you your application, and in an envelope that all you have to do is postage prepaid, mail it to your elections department to get registered for the future. Also, if your family or you have not filled out the census yet, you can fill it out on our website, marchtothepolls.org. But if you're interested in a chapter, it's info@marchtothepolls.org. Get going with your chapter and we will support you. Thank you.
Mr. Marcus, we have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you believe youth is often overlooked by the government when voting, since the rate of young voters is so low?
It was surprising in 2018, after the push to get younger people to vote, if the students will look, the more and more people that look like them are now in office, whether it be in Austin or on your city council or your school board or in the United States Congress. So the answer is politicians want to keep their job. They're not really stupid. They're going to go talk to the people that vote. And let me answer it differently. I'm an old white guy. I've had a good job. I've had a good education. I've had all of these things. You know, I do want my Social Security check and my Medicare that I'm going to get. But the students I talk to, their issues are different. They want a good job. They want a good education. They want the things that affect their lives or their parents' life. And when all of a sudden they start to go out and vote for themselves, for their issues, whatever they might be, you're going to find the politicians will listen to them and do listen to them. And what I tell them very simply, if you can't find a politician that believes like you, run for office yourself. I think Ms. Garcia, who's going to speak later, is a perfect example of that, the youngest school board member in Dallas County history. Run for office. Make a difference. Your voice is your power. You do have power.
Thank you so much, Mr. Marcus, for having such an impact on our high school students. Appreciate it. Our next presenter is a proud Dallas ISD alum and happens to be the Dallas ISD Board of Trustees Secretary, Carla Garcia. Trustee Garcia was inspired to run for the Dallas ISD District 4 seat because she wanted to address the inequities that she saw in the public school system. Ms. Garcia?
All right. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Carla Guadalupe Garcia. I'm your District 4 Dallas ISD School Board Trustee. District 4 is Pleasant Grove, Balch Springs, and Seagoville. If you attended Samuel Spruce or Samuel High School, I am your trustee. And it's a thrill to be here with you. I actually left our school board briefing that we had today, the second Thursday of every month. Was able to leave that a little bit early to join you here today, and you'll get to hear from our school board president, Trustee Justin Henry, later on after me. I've been able to join you briefly to hear the topic of conversation, but I know that I was invited to come talk to you about the importance of public service, the importance of voting, why I decided to run. And I'll start off with, I I'm a proud Dallas native, born in Dallas, raised in Pleasant Grove. I'm the firstborn daughter of Mexican immigrants from San Luis de la Paz, Guanajuato, Mexico, who I heard previously in this conversation, like the student in the conversation, my parents have a 3rd grade and a 6th grade education from rural Mexico, and grew up at a time and a place where women in general did not have a lot of agency and a lot of opportunities to do with themselves as they wanted, or access to opportunities really beyond elementary school. So my mother decided at a young age that she wanted something different, and my father did too in terms of economic opportunity. My father immigrates to the United States at the age of 14. He works here like a lot of young men at the time, everything from construction to agriculture to dishwashing to, he's done it all. He meets my mother in one of those instances where he went home to his mother to take care of her, and my mother decides that this is her opportunity to fulfill this American dream that a lot of young women in Mexico had at the time, which was they saw America as being this land of traveling, land of luxury, land of opportunities. And so she married my father. They made the tough choice, being both the youngest in their family, to stay permanently in the United States. At one point in time, every single one of my uncles was working in the United States, both maternal and paternal. But they decided not to stay in the country because it always has been, but it was especially hard for them to be immigrants in this country at the time. It was a very hostile environment for them wherever they were. But only my father and my mother decided that they were going to try. So anyways, I come along in the late 90s, and here in Dallas, Pleasant Grove, my brother and sister followed me just a few short years after, so it's 3 siblings. I attended Edward Teich Elementary, Runyon Elementary, and then I did not attend my home high school, which would have been Samuel High School. I attended Irma Rangel Young Women's Leadership School, the first public magnet all-girls school in the state of Texas. So I'm Dallas ISD through and through, and I, like many students in our district, am the first person in my family elementary school education from rural Mexico, and the conversation about going to college has always been something more of a dream than it seemed a possibility at the time. But thankfully, my high school in Rangel did a really great job of preparing me and offering me opportunities, and encouraged me to solicit things like financial aid, completing your FAFSA or TASFA every year, applying for admission, all these other little things that are affected by policy, and I'll go a little further into that. I was able to access the funding that I needed to go to college, and ultimately I attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So I'm a proud Texas Tar Heel, and was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina for 4 years. For a full year, 6 months, I spent in London studying abroad and interning with a social investment firm. In my last 6 months in college, I was actually an intern for the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for Hispanics at the Department of Education. So I learned in college, as I did in high school, that I really wanted to serve in a position of systemic change, of large scale impact change. And I graduated very passionate about the issues of public policy, that being my degree and a minor in entrepreneurship, because policy really sets the tone for just about every single aspect of our life. I mean, when you really sit down and think about it, as Richard very kindly touched on it, everything from the traffic lights to how often your trash gets picked up, to the conditions of your school, to how many people in your district account for a congressional representative. Like, I mean, everything about your daily life is affected by decisions made by an entity, by a board, either elected or appointed, but decisions are being made for you every single day that have significant repercussions for you and your family. And you want to be able to have an influence on them, especially when they've had an adverse effect on you. So let me backtrack a bit, but it was 2006, 7, 8 when the issue of immigration really took a forefront at the national policy level. At the time, I had family members of mine that were deported, and that left such a significant impact and trauma on me, because I started asking questions at the age of 14, 15. Why is this happening? Who is allowing this to happen? If it was a person, how did that person get into that position? Who supported that person? And I started asking a lot of why questions. ultimately in high school, I participated in a program called Ignite. And Ignite is all about empowering young women with the knowledge to be more civically and politically engaged and ultimately encourage us to run for office someday. And I took that message to heart. That's why I decided to study public policy in college. Ultimately graduated in 2018. So I'm the high school class of 2014. I'm the college class of 2018. And I graduated in May, started working for the Dallas County Promise here in Dallas, came back home in June. And in November, December, our school board member, Jaime Reséndez, announces that he's not seeking re-election on the Board of Trustees for Dallas ISD. He represents my seat. And I thought, to be honest, before I came back from college, my understanding of the school board was very limited. I only knew their function because of Ignite, but you couldn't ask me who my school board member was. I didn't know. I didn't know that our school district was governed in a lot of same and different ways in the city, in the state, in the country. And so ultimately, when Jaime Reséndez, our former trustee, now councilman for District 5, now he ran for city council and ultimately won that seat. When he announced that he wasn't seeking re-election, I had community members who came up to me and said, Carla, we're really excited about you coming back home. You got your degree, and you're working in education for the Dallas County Promise. Have you ever considered running for office yourself? And to be honest, yes, I knew that one day I was passionate, ignited enough about these issues to one day seek to run for office myself, but never at the age of 22, never just a few short months out of college. I thought, as I think many of us young women, but especially young women of color, are conditioned to believe that we need to be some sort of excellent resume before we consider ourselves to be ready to take something on, especially a position of leadership. But I had made up in my mind somehow that before I decided or even contemplated the possibility of running for office, that I needed to have 3 PhDs, 10 master's degrees, 4 bachelors, just an excessive number of accolades that would justify my aspiration in running for office, especially when we don't have many people who look like us in these positions to begin with. And so that's changing. Excitingly, it's changing. And in Dallas ISD, for Dallas ISD, when I was elected ultimately in my runoff election on June 9th of 2019, I not only became the youngest trustee ever elected in Dallas ISD history at the age of 22, but I also became the first Latina. And it's crazy to think that in a school district that is over 70% Latino, now with over its 150 years of governance history, it has never had someone who looks like me on the board of trustees, making decisions for its students, for its parents, for its educators, for its staff. And I did not run intending to become the first Latina or the youngest. It was really just a consequence of our political context, of our climate. And I'm very proud of those things. I'm very proud to be a first. Like I said, I'm the first in my family to graduate from high school. I'm the first to go to college. I'm now the first on the board in this way. But I cannot be the only one. And I will not be the only one. In my family, I've set the precedent that now we want to have more college graduates. We expect more college graduates. And the same thing on the board. I expect and hope to have more young people of color representing our districts. I think there's such a power in who we are, in our experiences being represented in leadership and in decision making. One of the things that helped me in my campaign was my average voter, by the way, in my district, District 4, at the time was a 64-year-old white conservative male from Seagoville. And you can imagine the discrepancy in being about a third of that age, 22, Latina, and the school board doesn't have any political affiliation, so you don't run as a Democrat or Republican or anything else. It's nonpartisan. So here I am intending to reach voters, to talk to them, to convince them that I am the choice for their school board representative. And in an issue like education, the reason why I was able, I believe, to connect strongly with voters in my district was, first of all, I went door to door. I absolutely knew that the way to ask people to get engaged, to become involved, was to go meet them where they are. And that is their door, in their language. So I'm proudly bilingual. Spanish is my first language, and as it is for many of my constituents, many of my community members in District 4. I every day after work from about 5 p.m. to as long as the sun went down or as long as someone was willing to talk to me, I would knock doors. And every single weekend. So it was an exhausting experience, to say the least. Exhausting every day. In any given evening, I could talk to 3 people, or I talked to, on a really good day, 40. It just meant that we were going and moving along very quickly. But I was very disillusioned because in my district, we have the lowest voter engagement. We have the lowest voter turnout in my district compared to the other 9 districts of Dallas ISD, Southeast Dallas. Of the people who were registered to vote, we only expected anywhere between 1% to 3% of people who were registered to vote to actually come to the polls. One of the things that helped me in my election was that we not only had the school board election in my district on the ballot, but we also had the mayoral race and the city council races. For this board of trustees, every year 3 trustees are up for re-election. We serve a term of 3 years, so it's a staggered election cycle on our board. Any given year, 3 trustees can be replaced. So my election for District 4, along with, I believe it was District 5 and District 7, were entirely new school board members. That would include Trustee Ben Mackey and Maxie Johnson and myself. Anyways, in conclusion, to say that I am now one of your 9 school board members for Dallas ISD. My 3 main functions are, number 1, to hire or fire the superintendent. Our superintendent is currently Dr. Michael Hinojosa. He will be with us until 2024. Or as contracts, his contract dictates until 2024. Number 2, we set the policy priorities for DISD. So I have a direct say, a direct vote on what happens in DISD, and I do not take that lightly. And number 3 is we set the budget. Dallas ISD has a $1.8 billion budget, $1.8 billion, not million, $1 billion, that helps take care of everything that needs to happen in a school district for you to be successful, for our schools to run, buses to move, you to be fed, for us to pay salaries, have new buildings, maintain buildings, everything you can think of. All of those decisions come before the board for approval. So ultimately, my job is to sit at a board briefing the second Thursday of every month, beginning at 11:30 a.m., and hear the agenda items that are going to come before me for a vote, and ask questions publicly so that even you from home or parents or anyone can be involved and stay involved with the information that we're receiving. So that on the 4th Thursday of every month at the board meeting, which begins at 6 p.m., we say one of 3 things. We say yes, we say no, or we abstain from the vote. Our board functions in voting majority. So as long as 5 trustees say yes, that vote passes and it goes. Or we can say no to the votes. But anyways, in conclusion, it's a very big responsibility that I walked into. It's been a roller coaster ride. There are really amazing days as a trustee member. There are also really, really busy days. And on my end, the work and the time and the effort and the energy that I put into being a trustee member is really fulfilling, because I get to make decisions for community members and students and families just like me. And that's exactly why I decided to run for the school board. In Pleasant Grove, in my immediate neighborhood, I am considered an exception. At the age of 18, at the age of 22, was considered an exception. And I know deep in my heart, as I know in my own family, that I could become the expectation of students of Dallas ISD, of Pleasant Grove, if we invested in them like it was invested in me, and we did a better job in a lot of different areas. But I'm here now, and I don't want my only legacy to be, you're the youngest and the first Latina. That was a coincidence. That's a matter of fact. I really am working on something that I'm so excited to show sometime soon. But my bread and butter is college and career readiness and success. And that's what I would ultimately want to leave behind as my legacy in Dallas ISD, whether it's in 1 term or if I decide to run again. But I still have time to think about it, because I still got over it, a year and a half left on this board before my term ends. But I'll be quiet there. I think I answered the general questions. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer them or go into more depth about other things.
We do have a question, Ms. Garcia. What is your greatest achievement as a board member thus far?
Ooh, that's a great question. Actually, that's the one that gets me back to the policy. My greatest achievement so far right now, I want to say is, I feel very strongly that our board, collectively of the 9 of us right now, have a very set mind on student achievement. The vote that I'm probably the proudest of to this point in time, there's so many of them, and we make so many of them every single time we meet. But one that I'm very proud of is probably the Bond 2020, to present the Bond 2020 to voters. We currently are in the hopes of, the Bond 2020 is the single largest bond in Texas public school history. And if this bond passes, it is going to bring so many opportunities to all of Dallas ISD, particularly here in District 4, things that infrastructure, buildings, opportunities that have really been lacking for a very long time, that we have an opportunity to address now. And I'm proud of being able to put that before voters. I'm really hoping that it passes. We really desperately need a lot of the resources that'll come out of it. But my legacy, as I had mentioned just briefly, I think is really going to be in the CCMR, College Career Military Readiness space. And if that passes, and if that goes before my first term ends, that's hopefully what I can say was my proudest moment on the board.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Garcia, and thank you for serving the needs of the students for the Dallas Independent School District. Do you know that you can still be involved in the 2020 general election? Leonidas Patterson will be presenting for Esmeralda Garcia with more information about the Dallas County Elections Department Student Worker Program.
They not only, Charlotte, they not only can still get involved, they can get paid. They can get paid up to $16 an hour. Richard Marcus might have something to contribute.
We work very closely, march the polls with the Dallas County Elections Department. And if you're 16 or older, you can become on election day a poll worker. And as Mr. Patterson says, it'll pay you approximately $16 an hour. It's like a 12-hour day. It's a long day. You need your parents' permission to do it if you're 16. And one other, just a small correction, at 16, needless to say, you're not a registered voter and you don't have to be one. All you have to be is a citizen of the United States, and you can become a poll worker if you're 16 or over. And if you want to apply for that, go to DallasCountyVotes.org. DallasCountyVotes.org, and there'll be a section called Getting Involved. Find the Getting Involved section, and and when you go in there, it'll be a student worker program, and we've had hundreds of students from the high schools go. It's really rewarding. They'll be in the polling booths on election day, and they'll be learning about the whole process and what it's like. So apply. Go to DallasCountyVotes.org and go Getting Involved and apply. It pays you approximately $16 an hour. Thank you.
Yeah, Richard, I was talking about 18-year-olds. If you're an 18-year-old, you have to be a registered voter.
Right, but if you're 16, they can do it at 16 or 17.
Yes. And your coach has all the information. If they need more information, call us. And don't worry about those deadlines that you see, because we have made arrangements with the Dallas County Elections Department so that you can be a part of that.
Okay, excellent. Thanks so much for that information. We're going to take a quick look at a couple of slides and go over the Social Impact Challenge Playbook. Let's see here. Okay, so the purpose of the playbook is to clarify expectations and offer tips and tools and resources for teams. It gives you something to think about. And some of those things to think about could be education or participation, rights, fraud, suppression, the Electoral College, popular vote, eligibility. The playbook provides team building exercises. It also asks important questions about voting. It outlines program guidelines and the judging criteria. And it equips you with videos and articles to guide your team to identify an issue and create a solution surrounding voting. One of many videos suggested in the playbook is the documentary Rigged, the Voter Suppression Playbook. Let's take a quick look.
Yaritza, Burgos, Christopher Carmichael, Tina Carmichael, Randy Burkhead, Christopher Carter, Edward Rachel.
I couldn't vote. I was purged off the rolls. I was highly upset about it. I want to vote.
I don't want everybody to vote. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down.
Mom, I don't want to hear about Selma anymore. We can actually go and vote. So I thought. Oh,
there's a plan. Oh, there's definitely a plan. People will go to great lengths to keep people from being free.
Whoever this guy is has challenged my right to vote.
It's about time we turned the lights on in the kitchen and started cleaning the cockroaches out of here.
Sheriff wanted him at the restraints.
He pretty much knew that he wasn't supposed to vote. It was just catch me if you can or ha ha ha.
He said I use somebody's identity for voting. I'm not guilty.
When we think something like voting rights is something everybody believes and that progress only goes in one direction, we've seen sudden reverses. We've seen that history can go in the wrong direction.
There is a temptation for the majority to restrict voting rights of the minority because it helps them stay in power.
Those of us who are the descendants of people who were lynched, when you come from that kind of lineage, you're not going to allow some loudmouth bigot to intimidate you.
Somebody's got to say this is not right, and somebody's got to say this is wrong.
That is a powerful documentary. It gives you something to think about. Here's a message from Dallas ISD Board of Trustees President Justin Henry.
Hello, I'm Justin Henry, President of the Dallas ISD School Board of Trustees. I believe that voting is a core principle of our democracy, and by participating in the DISD Social Impact Challenge, each one of you has an opportunity to make a difference in your community. Thank you for taking the challenge. Working together, you can make democracy work. Go vote.
Now that you've heard about the challenge, your mission over the next couple of weeks is simple. Select an issue around voting that you feel is important to address, and then design and implement a solution. We'll be back here November 19th for Presentation Day, and we can't wait to see your ideas. Thank you so much to all of the panelists today for sharing your expertise, and you can join us for Presentation Day, November 19th. Good luck, and thanks again for taking on the challenge. Let's continue to stay connected and get involved.